From the nation's capital, welcome to Your Source TV. Be empowered, encouraged, and inspired to look beyond the ordinary. Welcome to Your Source TV from the nation's capital. I'm Tamara Stuchlak, and in this segment we explore Lyme disease treatment and prevention. With us is Marjorie Veiga and Kathy Boileau. Both are patients and advocates for Lyme disease. Marjorie, Kathy, welcome to you both.
Thank you.
We should also tell folks that you are part of the National Capital Lyme and Tick-Borne Disease Association.
That's correct.
Let's start with a little bit of that foundation and move then quickly right into what is Lyme disease and what we should look out for.
The National Capital Lyme Disease Association is an organization that is a nonprofit that serves to be an advocate and educate and help people with Lyme disease. Our membership is from Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia, a little bit of West Virginia, but basically the nation's capital area, greater Washington, D.C. area.
Tell us about Lyme disease and how it's diagnosed and what we all should be watching out for. There's so many questions that people have about this rather mysterious condition.
Well, Lyme disease usually starts with a tick bite, and I say usually because it can also be transferred through placenta, for example, to an unborn child. But usually it's through a tick bite, and people don't often see the tick right away. It's very important for people when they go outside to check themselves for ticks when they come in. And this tick can transfer during the process of embedding itself under your skin, can transfer a bacteria, actually a spirochete, that's called Borrelia. And this Borrelia spirochete causes Lyme disease.
Is there a proof positive diagnostic test?
There is not. All of our tests are fallible. All of the tests will sometimes work and sometimes not work. It's very possible for somebody to get tested for Lyme disease, have Lyme disease, and have the test come out negative. Particularly if the person had antibiotics shortly after exposure to Lyme disease, this can render the antibody response to then turn negative. And Lyme disease is a clinical diagnosis as much as it is a lab diagnosis.
There are some misperceptions about Lyme.
Well, one is that it's easy to diagnose and easy to treat. It's not easy to diagnose, partly because the tests are not reliable, but also because it is so, it does mimic other ailments. For example, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia,
ALS, Alzheimer's, sometimes Parkinson's.
In the older, or some women are told it's a menopausal thing, that type of thing. So, it is also not easy to treat. A lot of people say, oh, 3 weeks of antibiotics and you should be fine. And you really need more than 3 weeks because the life cycle of the spirochete is 6 weeks, so 4 to 6 weeks.
So if you suspect, you've had a tick on you, somebody you know has had a tick, or someone suspects, what are some first things that should be done from your experiences with this?
You want to answer that one?
Yes. If you see a tick on yourself or on a family member or a friend, the first thing to do is remove the tick. Basically, you're taking a fine pointed tweezers and putting it behind the tick's head, between the head and the body, and firmly and gently pulling out. And as the tick comes out, it'll give a little popping feeling to the person, like it popped out. You have to check to be sure the head came out with the body. And then it's a good idea to take that tick and save it in a little jar, because the tick can be tested for Lyme disease. It's a relatively inexpensive test. A lot of physicians don't necessarily recommend that every tick that's bit someone get tested for Lyme disease. But my personal preference in my life at this point in time is, if I'm bit by a tick, I send it off to a lab for about $50 and let them test it.
And then you yourself should be tested about 6 weeks after that, because if you test too soon, your antibodies have not been developed enough to be measurable. So you don't want to test too soon until your immune system has built up the antibodies.
So how did your doctors confirm that you have this? I mean, there's a predominance of symptoms, and then they're overwhelmingly so, and then...
Right. Well, in my case, I had nerve damage, and there are only a few things that cause nerve damage. And she conducted a test for Lyme disease, and I came up negative, but she went ahead and treated me based upon the fact that there are very few things that cause the nerve damage, and my test came out positive after I underwent some treatment. So it was really kind of a diagnosis of exclusion, and just based upon her intuition and the number of patients she had already seen before me, and it just kind of all came together.
And how did you know that your daughter...
Well, she had chronic headaches for quite a while, and
no tick bites for either of you?
Well, I have pulled ticks off of her. We have woods in our yard, and we have deer prancing through there all the time. And I had pulled a tick off, but I never saw a rash. And then she was getting these headaches. Why would a 10-year-old get headaches, you know? So I had her tested, and she came up negative, and we continued to pursue answers. We went to a neurologist. We went to allergist and chiropractors and ophthalmologists and orthodontists to see what could be causing it. And a year later, we still didn't have an answer. All we had was some very powerful medications that didn't give her relief and were only sedating. And then finally, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and I said, I don't know what else to do. And she said, why don't you retest with a different lab, one that's more specific, one more sensitive. Retest for Lyme. We retested, and she came up positive.
And Kathy, how about you?
My story was kind of interesting in that I was a very, very active, high energy person. I was a biker, a runner, a camper, a gardener. I worked 12-hour shifts at Fairfax Hospital. I rarely ran out of energy, and I noticed over a period of about 2 months that I was getting more and more exhausted. And I would wear down at work, and I would sit at the nurse's station and just think, oh, I can't get up and go see the next patient. And then one morning I woke up with severe pain in my right hip very suddenly. I had gone to bed the night before feeling just wonderful. Woke up the next morning, I had this severe pain. It was almost impossible to stand because the pain was so great when I tried to bear weight, and it was in my right hip. And I went to a orthopedic person who put cortisone shot in that hip, and within 72 hours, it must have given the wrong message to my immune system to shut down, go to sleep, don't worry about this, because the disease just really flared up, and I came down with the worst case of flu I'd ever had in my life, just achy, exhausted.
So you're suggesting that the spirochete has a dormant phase?
No, I'm suggesting that it was there the whole time, but my immune system was keeping it at bay a little bit until I got the cortisone injection. And that is what triggered the real hard symptoms, the symptoms of fatigue, brain fog. I found myself at work getting confused and forgetting things, and I came to the conclusion that I was no longer safe to be nursing for patients in a hospital. And then one day at work, I collapsed. I just physically collapsed, and they sent me home, and I never went back. I was never able to get to the point where I could really work again. I did try 4-hour shifts at about 1.5 years later, but after 4 hours, I would go out to my car and take a long nap before I could even drive home.
What are some practical approaches that you both now use based on being outdoor people? You know, your home are near woods. We hear that here in Fairfax County, that there's, you know, large populations of deer. Tell us.
Well, in terms of your yard, there are things you can do. You can treat the yard with chemicals. You can also create barriers between your grass area and your wooded area. You can put up deer fences. You know, there are things you can do for your yard. As far as your body goes, there are repellents that you can apply. There's oil of lemon eucalyptus, there's Pickardin, there's DEET. And a lot of these are, also when you're in the garden, tuck your pants into your socks and wear hats. And actually, when you come in from the garden or from hiking, camping, you should put your wash directly in the dryer, because the high heat
Dry
kill
it
them.
first.
You might even have to do 2 cycles to
Wow.
yeah, and then when you wash, put on the high heat. And then just do the tick checks. We call them tickle checks in our household. We check under here and under here, behind the ears.
Crevices.
In the hair, we do it right.
Nape of the neck.
Nape of the neck. I've heard of a family that found one in their son's eyebrows. Also, we do a scalp massage just to see if we can feel them. They are so small, so you have to be able to feel and see them.
Back to psychological effects on family members.
I found that I was depressed because my whole life had been turned upside down. Everything that I loved, everything that I knew was now gone. I couldn't do the things I had done before. And then one day I went to a friend who was a social worker, and she sat down with me and some friends who had similar issues, and we made lists, and we made 2 lists, and one of them was all the things that I've lost after getting sick with my chronic illness. And then the other list was all the things that I gained after getting sick with my chronic illness. And I made my lists, and it took me about 20 minutes. And when my lists were done, my gain list was twice as long as the lost list.
Yeah. Did that surprise you?
And it very much surprised me, but it also turned me around psychologically, because I realized that my life was different. And my primary care doctor said to me one day, Kathy, when the door gets closed to you, God opens another one. So you have to look for the open doors. So keep looking for those open doors, because they'll keep coming.
Yeah.
And sure enough, those open doors kept coming. And that's how I got to be part of National Capital Lyme Disease Association. That's how I started working as a board member. I'm doing what I'm able to do within my own capabilities. I have a new purpose in life. And it has made a huge difference in, I think, my healing, because psychologically, I'm able to feel I have a purpose in life again.
Yeah.
So co-infections play a tricky role with Lyme disease. And Kathy, could you make some distinctions for us?
Ticks are dirty creatures. They carry with them more than just Lyme disease. They also carry Babesia, Ehrlichia, help me, Marjorie. Bartonella.
And Rocky Mountain spotted fever.
Mycoplasma. In my case, I had Babesia, and Babesia symptoms are very similar to Lyme disease symptoms. And the first physician who treated me informed me that I must be well after 28 days of treatment, because after all, that's all it should take to cure Lyme disease, even if I didn't feel any better. But he never looked to see if I might have Babesia. So later on, when I found another physician who treated me a longer period of time,
still weren't feeling well.
and I was not feeling any better, not even a little bit better. And the other physician tested again, said, yes, you still have Lyme disease, treated me again, longer period of time, and looked for co-infections, and found out that I was suffering from Babesia. And
Which has to be treated differently.
It's treated with different drugs.
Different medications.
Right. And so treatment with Babesia then helped me to turn another corner to get to another level of wellness that I hadn't experienced before.
Where can individuals find support, or if they have a friend or suspect themselves, or currently are not in a support group and have a Lyme or associated chronic condition?
National Capital Lyme has several support groups, several chapters throughout the Washington, D.C. area. They can go to www.natcaplyme.org to find out about the support group meetings. We also have message boards, and we have meetings where we have face-to-face opportunities for patients to sit down and talk to each other. And we have luncheons. The moms get together and have lunches and talk about how to take care of our children.
Strategies, wellness approaches.
We share doctor information and medication. You know, watch out for this medication because my daughter had this side effect. And so, there's always a meeting. There's people you can talk to on the phone or message on the Yahoo group, and there's plenty of support face-to-face, daytime and in the evening.
Marjorie and Kathy, thank you so much for sharing this information and your stories and your challenges, and helping us to learn more about key aspects of Lyme and what to do right away. So thank you for joining us, and we're Your Source TV from the